I have a theory that most people in most circumstances don't if I'm taking one of my rifles off the wall back there and it's just a general walking around rifle. I don't need 10x. I don't need 1 to 10. I don't need a 1 to 8. I mean, it's nice to have. I'm not wrong. It's nice to have, but I'm probably not walking around with it on 10x or 8x. And I could save myself a good pound of weight if I went to something a bit more compact like this, or the primary arms with an offset red dot, especially people who are running a 1 to 8, 1 to 10 with an offset red dot anyway. And I think that's probably a better fit for the average person, unless they have a special need where they know they're going to need to go. They need that extra weight or the different reticle design. I don't know. This is where I think we're going.
So it's generally a perfectly reasonable point, although a lot depends on your budget, weight budget and money budget. I will point out a couple. I'm generally on board with you when we are staying on the budget. That's one of the reasons I really like this new crop of prismatics. The way I use a scope, I very strongly lean toward front focal plane designs, even with low power variables, which mandates high quality illumination. And there is no such thing at the moment on the market as a front focal plane low power variable under $1,000 that, in my opinion, is worth buying. Or at least it's good enough by my standards. And I'm picky. But there is such a thing as a $300 prismatic that's good enough by my standards. And here's the fun thing, right? I use the reticle for a lot of things, so I dislike second focal plane low power variables. People say, oh, I only use them on 1 power if it's, let's say, 1 to 6. On 1 power or on 6 power. I always end up with some intermediate magnification. The reticle means something else every time. I just don't want to think about it. And this immersive image that you get from prismatics, like the Trihawk, is not something that modern low power variables can replicate. Now, if they were designed for that, they could, but they're not designed for it, and they make it with something else in mind.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, that makes a really big difference for me. As far as an average shooter doesn't need or does need, this is a discussion that honestly we really shouldn't have. Ever since Jeff Gurwitch, who you know,
Mm-hmm.
Mike, obviously, did this video. I'm trying to remember. I think you actually talked about it. You mentioned it, and I saw it. Where don't prepare for a particular scenario or something like that.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Okay. It was an extremely well put, and the basic point is that you haven't the foggiest bloody idea what you're going to run into.
Mm-hmm.
So you figure out what your budget is, and you come up with the most flexible setup you can get for that budget. That's basically as simple as it gets. And we can have a nice argument about this, but you're going to lose if you're going to try to tell me that the nice 3-power prismatic is as flexible as a nice 1 to 10 power front focal plane Razor Gen 3.
No, not going to argue that one. I absolutely believe a good variable optic, low power variable, is huge amounts of flexibility.
Correct.
What it comes back to me is that weight budget. How much in my weight budget am I willing to sacrifice to get that?
Exactly right. But the moment you start trying to figure out how much weight budget am I willing to sacrifice, you will immediately jump into different scenarios and say that, oh, for anything I'm going to encounter, it's just not worth it. You're basically discarding that 800-yard shot that you need the 1 to 10 to make. And what is the probability of you and I will ever have to make one of those in anger? Approximately 0. But the moment we say that, we are going counter to Jeff's original point.
Mm-hmm.
You do not prepare for anything specific.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah, on the 800-yard, separate conversation another day that actually would be really interesting to have.
However, if you have $600 to spend, I would much rather buy $300 prismatic with an offset $300 red dot than a $600 low power variable.